The case of Christopher Wallace, known worldwide as the Notorious B.I.G., officially remains unsolved, even though multiple sources suggest that the identity of the individual responsible has long been known. One of the most surprising aspects of this case is that more than 25 years after his tragic death on March 9, 1997, the investigation remains unresolved. What's even more startling isn't just the lingering uncertainty, but the possibility that key information may have been intentionally withheld. When FBI agent Phil Carson appeared on a list of potential witnesses in a lawsuit filed by Wallace's family assistant, City Attorney Lewis Lee reportedly made a striking remark. "We can't allow Agent Carson to testify because doing so could risk the city losing hundreds of millions of dollars in the lawsuit." This statement raised serious concerns among observers and suggested that important evidence related to the case may have been suppressed. Judge Florence Marie Cooper later declared a mistrial and criticized the handling of the case, concluding that a significant amount of evidence had been deliberately withheld. Her ruling pointed to troubling inconsistencies in how the investigation was conducted, particularly concerning individuals who may have had inside knowledge. Though law enforcement continues to list Biggie's murder as an open case, officials have privately pointed to Wardell Pucci Faus, a man connected to local street activity who was dead in 2003, as the prime suspect. Still, the case remains in limbo, and many wonder why repeated efforts to reopen the investigation never seem to move toward a resolution. The unanswered questions continue to cast a shadow over one of the most tragic losses in music history. Judge declares mistrial in Biggie Smalls case. A stunning development shook the legal system when U.S. District Judge Florence Marie Cooper declared a mistrial in the Notorious B.I.G. wrongful death case on July 6, 2005. The trial lasted just 3 days before coming to an unexpected halt, leaving the courtroom in disbelief. The proceedings started June 21st, but took a dramatic turn after an anonymous late-night phone tip changed everything. An unknown caller who claimed to be an LAPD officer gave an explanation about vital evidence in the Wallace death that had never surfaced. This revelation sent shockwaves through the legal proceedings. Rolling Stone reported that the announcement stunned everyone who had been following the case in the media. Most spectators remained unaware of the remarkable events behind the scenes, including an LAPD division lockdown and the discovery of hidden incriminating documents. The Wallace family sued Los Angeles City for wrongful death, claiming corrupt LAPD officers played a role in Biggie's death. Nobody predicted that the case would reveal what Judge Cooper later described as law enforcement's deliberate hiding of evidence. The court ordered the city to investigate after receiving the anonymous tip. The probe revealed new evidence mostly found in Detective Stephen Katz's desk and cabinet. Katz led the Wallace death investigation. Court records showed Katz kept a log of his 2001 meetings with officials about the Biggie Smalls dying. Yet these documents reached the family's attorneys only after the trial began. Katz claimed during his deposition that he forgot about the log in his desk, an excuse Judge Cooper called absolutely incredible. Her written ruling stated she believed LAPD had purposely hidden substantial evidence that showed rogue officers' involvement in the rapper's death. The hidden documents revealed explosive information. Interviews with Rafael Perez's former cellmate. Statements linking Perez and Officer David Mack to death row records. Details about Perez and Mack's presence at the Peterson Automotive Museum when Wallace was dead. Former lead investigator Russell Poole stressed these statements showed just a glimpse into hundreds of pages of documents that were hidden from Wallace family attorneys. The cellmate specifically stated that Perez and Mack were involved in death row records. Perez got involved in death row through Mack. This evidence cast the Biggie Smalls case in a new light and supported theories about police involvement in his death. Judge Cooper not only declared a mistrial but also granted the Wallace family their attorney fees. The city had to pay over $1 million in sanctions. The judge's decision marked one of the harshest judicial criticisms of LAPD in recent times. Rolling Stone emphasized this wasn't just any ruling. It came from one of the most respected district court judges in Southern California declaring in open court that the LAPD's lead investigator on the B.I.G. death case for the last 6 years had deliberately concealed hundreds of pages of documents. These concealed documents supported conspiracy theories about corrupt officers and suggested Rafael Perez, the central figure in LAPD's Rampart scandal, might be connected to the rapper's death. Physical evidence in the Biggie Smalls case faced intense scrutiny, raising serious questions about the investigation's integrity. The Wallace family's attorneys announced plans to refile the lawsuit with fresh allegations against LAPD and former officer Rafael Perez after the mistrial. Assistant City Attorney Don Vincent maintained he would still like to try the case on the merits, though legal battles continued for years afterward. FBI agent Phil Carson identifies internal sabotage. FBI agent Phil Carson exposed what he calls a coordinated plan to derail the investigation into Notorious B.I.G's death. Carson led the FBI's investigation into possible LAPD involvement in Biggie's dying. He soon found himself caught between law enforcement agencies, city officials, and media personalities. Special Agent Phil Carson's career took an unexpected turn after attorneys for the plaintiffs in Wallace v. Los Angeles listed him as a witness. The wrongful death lawsuit was filed by Biggie's family against the city. Carson had been carefully looking into possible links between LAPD corruption cases and the rapper's 1997 death in Los Angeles. His investigation produced strong evidence. "I had evidence that LAPD officers were involved," Carson stated plainly. He made an unusual move for an active FBI agent and agreed to testify about his findings in the civil trial. This could support the Wallace family's claims about police involvement in the Biggie Smalls case. Carson's evidence was compelling enough that he presented his case to the local U.S. Attorney's Office with his superior officer's support. But he would soon learn that powerful forces were working against him. The city attorney's office acted fast after Carson's name showed up on the witness list. Assistant City Attorney Louis Lee set up a meeting with Carson and his FBI supervisors. Lee made a startling statement: "We cannot let Agent Carson testify, because if he does, we stand a better than 50% chance of losing upwards of $600 million in this lawsuit." Another FBI agent at the meeting confirmed this financial threat. Lee also warned that Carson's testimony would ruin the LAPD and the relationship between the LAPD and the federal government, including the FBI. The core team arranged a bigger meeting that included the highest-ranking FBI officials in Los Angeles, senior command staff of the LAPD, attorneys defending the city in the Wallace lawsuit. This unusual gathering saw LAPD and city attorney representatives stress the close relationship between the FBI and LAPD. They pointed to federal programs and task forces with both agencies, big financial investments in joint projects, the damage this could do to interagency cooperation. One city representative made a highly controversial statement suggesting it would be reckless to jeopardize the relationship in question. According to reports, another city official allegedly used language that was considered deeply inappropriate and offensive in reference to Wallace. This remark quickly drew strong criticism from community leaders and civil rights advocates for its lack of professionalism and respect. A second FBI agent present at the meeting later confirmed that the inappropriate comment had indeed been made. In a related development, Los Angeles Times reporter Chuck Phillips, whose reporting would later come under scrutiny for potentially affecting the investigation, was accused of pressuring Detective Carson for sensitive information. According to accounts from the FBI's media relations team, Phillips allegedly became confrontational and made personal threats when Carson declined to provide certain details. Phillips later published an article revealing the FBI had ended its investigation into Biggie's death information that wasn't public yet. The article mentioned Carson's contact with the Wallace family's attorneys as a reason for the shutdown, making things harder for Carson. The FBI gave in to the city's demands and wouldn't let Carson testify in the civil trial. This crushed Carson, who later called the cover-up the biggest miscarriage of justice in my 20-year career at the FBI. Voletta Wallace's attorney Perry Sanders challenged the FBI's reasons for stopping the investigation. He said, the LAPD exerted political pressure on the FBI to lay off the case. Assistant FBI Director Richard T. Garcia denied this. No one at the FBI was asked or directed to stop anything. But Carson's experience told a different story. The internal interference Carson uncovered created a major roadblock in solving the Biggie Smalls case. This would affect both the investigation and Carson's career for years to come. City officials warn of financial fallout if truth emerges. Money drove the decision to suppress evidence in the Biggie Smalls case. Former law enforcement officials' testimonies revealed how financial liability became the main reason city officials blocked the truth about Biggie Smalls' assassination from coming out. A vital meeting between FBI officials and city representatives exposed the city's real concerns. Assistant City Attorney Lewis Lee made his position clear to the FBI agents. We cannot let Agent Carson testify because if he does, we stand a better than 50% chance of losing upwards of $600 million in this lawsuit. A second FBI agent at the meeting confirmed this startling admission. Money, not justice, shaped the death investigation's direction. The city had good reason to worry about money. The Recording Industry Association of America reported Notorious B.I.G.'s album sales reached 17 million by 2010. The Wallace Estate's 2007 amended lawsuit estimated their financial losses at $500 million after his death. These numbers showed the city faced massive liability if found responsible for Biggie's death. The rapper's estate's attorney, Bradley C. Gage, pointed out that Wallace was immensely popular when he died. He was likely to earn hundreds of millions of dollars over his lifetime money that could be recouped in a wrongful death suit. City officials saw these numbers and stepped in quickly. City attorneys tried to frame their argument as protecting taxpayers' money. The irony lies in how they blocked the justice system from working properly in this high-profile death case. City officials worried about more than just money. They stressed how the Biggie Smalls case might damage important institutional relationships. LAPD representatives and city attorneys reminded FBI leadership about the relationship between the police department and the FBI, the various federal programs and task forces the two agencies were involved with together, and the enormous amount of money that had been committed to these projects. Some officials argued that cooperation between the FBI and LAPD was too important to risk. One individual reportedly made a highly inappropriate and dismissive comment suggesting it would be unreasonable to jeopardize that partnership over the death of someone they described in a deeply disrespectful and prejudiced way. This remark, later confirmed by witnesses, reflected a disturbing level of disregard toward the victim and revealed how some within the system may have deprioritized the case based on personal bias rather than justice. The pressure worked. FBI Assistant Director Richard T. Garcia publicly denied that anyone at the FBI was asked or directed to stop anything. Evidence suggested otherwise. Valletta Wallace's attorney, Perry Sanders, learned from a reliable confidential source that the LAPD exerted political pressure on the FBI to lay off the case. The Wallace family wanted justice more than money. Attorney Gage explained, "I think that the family is interested in justice. They want to find the culprit and have those people put behind bars. That can help them put this tragic situation behind them." The case was dismissed anyway. Gage suggested this would let authorities investigate without having to worry whether their agency will be found liable at a trial. The city's defense showed clear inconsistencies throughout the legal proceedings. City lawyers said any failure to turn over documents was unintentional. Assistant City Attorney Don Vincent said he was ready to try the case again. Behind closed doors, officials actively worked to suppress testimony and evidence. These contradictions between public statements and private actions revealed the city's real priorities in the reopened Biggie Smalls case. Civil rights attorney Stephen Yagman noted, "There has never been any downside risk for police and their lawyers engaging in misconduct in trial." Reporter Chuck Phillips leaks. Investigation details. During the investigation into Biggie Smalls, Chuck Phillips, a writer for the Los Angeles Times, caused a significant amount of trouble. The lawsuit was put in jeopardy as a result of his publications which disclosed secret material. The coverage of the rap music industry by the journalist who won the Pulitzer Prize resulted in issues that were extremely problematic for all parties concerned. The identity of Psycho Mike Robinson was revealed in an article written by Phillips and published by the Los Angeles Times in the year 2005. The article defined Robinson in terms of a reliable gang informant who had testified in the federal court against the bounty hunter Bloods and worked as an informant for the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department's Major Crimes Bureau for more than 15 years. Following this experience, Robinson's life underwent a significant transformation. He was the focus of many assaults, and his family was subjected to threats of physical violence. Sergeant Richard Valdemar of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department pointed the finger of responsibility at the newspaper for putting informants in vulnerable situations. He stated that this occurred as a result of Robinson's evidence which established a connection between the dying of Wallace and Suge Knight, the head of Dying Row LAPD gang cops, and Amir Muhammad. At the time of his passing on December 5, 2006, Robinson was just 49 years old. It was the stress and anxiety caused by his exposure and identification in Chuck Phillips' hit piece that Sergeant Valdemar asserted was the reason for Robinson's death. In the case of Biggie Smalls, Robinson's testimony turned out to be extremely important. In his capacity as an FBI informant and a crucial witness in the wrongful death prosecution of Notorious B.I.G., he provided testimony regarding the intentions for vengeance that death row security head Reginald Wright had following the dying of Shakur Shakur. "We were going to get those people who downed Pac Biggie and his crew," Robinson recalled Wright adding. "We were going to accomplish this." In addition to exposing the informant, Phillips did not stop there. Specifically, he went for FBI agent Phil Carson, who was in charge of the investigation into Biggie Smalls. Carson pointed out that Phillips started phoning me constantly and asking me questions about the case that I couldn't answer. Phillips began pestering Kathy Viray, the chief of the Public Information Section for the FBI, with threats to ruin Carson, when Carson stated that he would not disclose any personal information. There is evidence that these dangers exist. Phillips had warned her that he would destroy Phil Carson's career if he didn't get answers, and she found herself recalling this menace. Even when Viray and Steve Kramer, the assistant chief counsel at the FBI's Los Angeles headquarters, explained Carson's limits, Phillips continued to behave in a threatening manner. As soon as Phillips published the article, FBI Ends Probe into Dying of Rap Star, on the top page of the Metro section of the Los Angeles Times, the situation became even more desperate. The decision of the Federal Bureau of Investigation FBI to end its investigation into the death of Christopher Wallace was initially disclosed in this article. There was one passage that the FBI officers thought to be very alarming. The statement that Carson was the most inept or laziest agent I had ever met was attributed to David Mack, who was connected to the investigation according to Phillips. This characterization was met with vehement opposition from Carson's superiors. It was brought to their attention that Carson approached Mack with caution after gaining knowledge that sources feared Mack more than Suge Knight. Immediately, the Los Angeles branch of the FBI severed all contacts with Phillips. An unusual action was taken by the assistant director of the office, who dispatched Viray and the assistant chief counsel to meet Phillips at a pub in the downtown area late one night. She pleaded with him to refrain from destroying Carson's career. Both Phillips' involvement with the evidence and his publicity blitz were responsible for derailing the progress of the inquiry. In his explanation of the death of Biggie Smalls, Carson emphasized how the acts of the reporter contributed to the obstruction of justice. FBI shuts down. Biggie Smalls. Investigation. In January of 2005, the Federal Bureau of Investigation FBI concluded their investigation into the death of Notorious B.I.G. in 1997. They made the decision to dismiss the premise that corrupt law enforcement officers were involved in the assassination plan. In a statement, Louis J. Caprino, Jr., who is serving as the chief of the FBI's Los Angeles Criminal Division, indicated that federal prosecutors found no basis for prosecution after analyzing the material. Agent Phil Carson was immediately prevented from testifying by FBI authorities once they became aware of his communication with Voletta Wallace's legal team and his subpoena in the civil litigation that she was pursuing. With this judgment, the lead investigator who had spent the previous 18 months constructing a case based on the possibility that the Los Angeles Police Department was involved in Biggie's death was quieted. Because of the date, there were significant concerns with the decision. The Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) asserted that Carson's removal from the witness list was a standard administrative review for agents who had been subpoenaed. There was a strange alignment between the decision and the rising pressure from city leaders who were concerned about the financial burden. Carson expressed his annoyance at the fact that someone was preventing him from revealing his discoveries. "I had the case he brought attention to. We definitely had enough to prosecute." The results of his research had discovered extensive evidence that may link corrupt cops to the death of the rapper. However, this evidence would never be put to the test in a judicial proceedings. In a move that was out of the ordinary, the Assistant United States Attorney who was assigned to the case, David Vaughn, refused to provide Carson with a letter of declination that explained the prosecution's decision to reject the case. A high-profile inquiry was discontinued due to this uncommon omission, which resulted in no formal record detailing the reason for the decision. Concern was expressed by Carson's superiors over the absence of documentation. At a later meeting with the leadership of the FBI to analyze the case, page by page, the assistant director questioned the stagnant progress that had been made. Carson recounted saying, "After the assistant director heard and read the evidence, he looked at me and said, 'Why isn't this case being indicted?'" Carson was informed by the assistant director that the missing declination letter was missing, and the assistant director urged Carson, "You get that letter of declination," in order to shield the FBI from any potential ramifications. In the end, the letter was never delivered. Because of this irregular method, suspicions were stoked, raising concerns among some observers that political considerations may have influenced the case. The attorney for Voletta Wallace, Perry Sanders, made a direct accusation against the Los Angeles Police Department, stating that they exerted political pressure on the FBI to lay off the case. The Assistant Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Richard T. Garcia, has publicly refuted these allegations, claiming that no one at the FBI was asked or directed to stop anything. In the instance of Biggie, the physical evidence was never investigated, and the Federal Bureau of Inquiry never reopened the inquiry. One of the most infamous fatalities in the history of hip-hop remained officially unresolved for several decades. Secret recordings reveal LAPD-FBI collusion. Chuck Phillips extended an invitation to Phil Carson, an FBI agent, to visit the office building of the Los Angeles Times. Everyone was going to be taken aback by the surprise that came next. Carson had the expectation that Phillips would present him with materials pertaining to the Biggie Smalls case. Unanticipated events transpired during the conference. At the moment that Phillips disclosed his genuine intention, the editing section was nearly devoid of inhabitants. He showed recordings of phone talks that he had with Mike Burko, who was the deputy chief of the Los Angeles Police Department. These tapes were claimed by some to suggest a possible coordinated effort between high-ranking officials of the Los Angeles Police Department and members of the media. They collaborated in order to sabotage the inquiry into Biggie's death on several occasions. Phillips arrived, and the two of them took the elevator up to the editing section of the newspaper, which was almost completely empty according to the reports that were published. Phillips had brought him there not to see anything Carson discovered, but rather to hear. The subsequent talks, which were taped, would provide evidence that long-held suspicions about obstruction in the case were correct. After some time had passed, an investigative filmmaker named Don Sikorsky said that he had discovered sourced proof that Phillips was in bed with one of the top brass at LAPD, namely Mike Burko. He was receiving information from Burko that will be printed in the newspaper. This connection ultimately resulted in upwards of 5 stories that created a false narrative surrounding the investigation into Biggie's death. There was incriminating evidence contained inside the tapes. Carson recalled Burko's direct statements, which were as follows: "We have to make sure that Phil Carson is completely and utterly uncredible. In the event that he ever gives testimony, the Los Angeles Police Department will be annihilated. One interpretation of the recording suggests intent to discredit the investigation. When taken together, these comments indicated that there was a concerted effort to thwart the inquiry. According to Burko, I was nothing more than a bystander. According to Carson, the fact that he ruined my life meant absolutely nothing to him. I mean, these two guys were conspiring not just against me, but against the entire Wallace side of the case, against the death investigation itself. The character of Burko has been called into question on previous occasions. In 2006, Sergeant Yame Crystal of the Los Angeles Police Department filed a formal complaint alleging inappropriate workplace behavior. She claimed that personal relationships were being used to influence career advancement. Although Burko admitted to being involved in a relationship with an officer under his supervision that lasted for 3 years, he denied that this affected professional decisions or promotions. The way that the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles Times, and the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office made it personal against me, where they were just trying to ruin me, ruin my career, and ruin this case. Carson voiced his disgust with the personal assaults they had made against him. Guys, you should be angry at the evidence, it says. When it comes to the proof, you guys are the ones that are worried. The tapes provide crucial evidence of widespread efforts to conceal the truth about the dying of Biggie Smalls and to shield prospective suspects from the consequences of their actions. Carson leaves. Los Angeles. After career. Ruined. After being subjected to persistent pressure from the Los Angeles Police Department and several media figures, Phil Carson's career as an FBI agent investigating the Biggie Smalls case took a disastrous turn. He had spent years attempting to unearth the truth behind one of hip-hop's most infamous fatalities, but the professional assaults and institutional hurdles forced him to leave the city where he had been trying to do so throughout those years. During the time when his investigation was terminated and he was unable to testify in the civil complaint brought by the Wallace family, Carson made a decision that would forever alter his life and his destiny. As a result of his inability to continue working in what he saw to be a corrupt workplace, he requested a transfer to a location outside of Los Angeles. As a result of the FBI allowing him to go to Orange County, his direct involvement in the investigation of Biggie Smalls came to an end. Carson used the phrase "sheer hell" to characterize his time while working for the Los Angeles Police Department. Due to the fact that he attempted to forward an inquiry that influential individuals wished to bury, he was subjected to a great deal of pressure. I had evidence that LAPD officers were involved, and I was shut down by the LAPD and city attorneys inside Los Angeles, he asserted with determination. LA was poisoned for me, Carson remarked while pondering the reasons behind his departure from the city. I didn't believe anybody in the whole damned city. These statements demonstrated how profoundly disillusioned he felt after witnessing with his own eyes how institutions that were supposed to safeguard justice really worked against it. The biggest miscarriage of justice in my 20-year career at the FBI. The agent used to describe the circumstances surrounding Biggie's death. Carson was successful in maintaining his optimism that the truth will eventually be revealed. I knew one day I was going to tell the truth, he said to reporters. The transfer of Carson represented more than simply a change in employment. It demonstrated that he would not remain silent about the misconduct that he had witnessed. Within the inquiry, he stood out from the other participants because he was of the opinion that justice might still be served in the Biggie Smalls case. The truth is finally coming out, and it's documented, he stated to reporters. Why the Biggie Smalls case still matters today. Over the years, numerous questions have emerged regarding the role of certain individuals within the Los Angeles Police Department in the investigation into Biggie Smalls' death. Legal filings, including one by Biggie's mother, Valletta Wallace, have suggested that some officials may have had close ties to individuals associated with death row records, raising concerns about transparency and objectivity in the case. In a time when public trust in institutions is under intense scrutiny, this high-profile investigation remains a striking example of how public confidence can be shaken when justice is delayed or denied. Biggie's death occurred just 6 months after Tupac Shakur's another profound loss to the music world. These two events happening so close together symbolize the darkest chapter of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, one that escalated beyond music into something much more dangerous. To this day, Biggie's death remains officially unsolved. No one has been brought to trial, and his family continues to seek answers. For many, this unresolved case represents a larger issue: the consistent lack of resolution in cases involving high-profile black victims. Biggie Smalls wasn't just an entertainer. He was a storyteller, one who gave voice to a generation and reshaped the sound of modern music. His influence on hip-hop is still felt today, not only through the music he left behind, but in the style, spirit, and ambition of today's biggest artists. His passing didn't mark the end of his influence. In fact, it immortalized him as one of the genre's greatest icons, and his story continues to inspire conversations about art, fame, and legacy. At the height of his career, Biggie was admired by millions, but he also faced intense pressure, scrutiny, and danger. His life and untimely death forces us to ask difficult questions. How do we support the people we celebrate? How do we ensure that behind the fame, there is safety, privacy, and respect? Thank you for watching. See you next time.